All right. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening, Father.
This week we're going to do the Publican and the Pharisee. I just realized in my notes that I wrote it as Pharisee and the Publican. It's the other way around. I know there's versions of it that say Pharisee, the Publican, but I always sounds weird for me. Anyway, so who would like to read tonight? It hasn't read before.
I don't think I read last time.
You've read before.
Okay.
Jesse, you really want to read?
I do, yes. Thank you. The parable of the Pharisee and the publican. He also told this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and despised others. 2 men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood and prayed thus with himself, God, I thank thee that I'm not like the other men, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week, I give tithes of all that I get. But the tax collector, standing far off, would not even lift up his eyes to heaven, but beat his breast, saying, God be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you that this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but he who humbles himself will be exalted.
All right. Thank you, Jesse.
Well, Father.
Thoughts, questions, concerns? Raise your hand before you speak. Nobody? Jesse.
Just a thought. I think it's pretty interesting that the Second Temple Israelites would fast twice a week, like we do.
Yeah.
That's just a thought I had while reading.
It's not quite the direction I would go with that, but it's an interesting thought. Yeah, I mean, they were fasting is important. In fact, on a side note, before we get into this, does anybody know the reason why we fast on Wednesdays and Fridays?
It's because Jews fast, I guess on Tuesdays and
Thursdays.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Have I told you that before?
Nate told me.
I told him that one, didn't I? I told him that one, yeah. Literally, there's a canon that says the reason we fast on Wednesdays and Fridays is so that we don't fast like the Jews.
Is that something like put through by John Chrysostom? Because I know he was...
No, it's a council. I can't remember which council it is. I'll find it for you and I'll put it in the show notes, if you will, for those who are curious.
It's different.
And with that, because I can't remember the canon off the top of my head, but it's actually a canon of the church that says you do not fast on Tuesdays and Thursdays because the Jews fast on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Which I've always kind of found funny because we talk all this stuff about canceling people. And, St. John Chrysostom was surprised this has been canceled because of that. But also the Orthodoxy, we're getting hit by other things in the world, but that's one of those ones where people go, wait, you do it literally just because of that? That's anti-Semitic of you. I mean, if you want to approach it that way, it's not right, but, Anyway, Jason, staying on topic.
The Pharisee is very prideful within himself and looks towards himself as he is higher than others. Rather, where the tax collector, even with the sins that he has committed, he still prays to God for mercy upon him, and he doesn't make himself higher than others, and is within himself and within prayer to God. He exalts himself to the Lord, and he humbles himself, whereas the Pharisee is like, yes, I am better than these other men. I do this, and this.
Let's see if people remember things. Although some of you were not here when I asked this question in this sermon, so, but let's see how many people remember this. What's the definition of humility? Anybody know? Do you know? I'm just picking on you. If you don't raise your hand, I eventually just pick on you. Nate? You look like you wanted to raise your hand.
I did, but I wasn't prepared for this one. But I'll swing it. I'll wing it.
Okay. What's the definition of humility?
Well, I got a quick answer.
Wait, no. Hold on.
Well, this is going to sound silly, but it's not being above reproach. And in the way I visualize humility, my spiritual life is thinking that everyone else around you is better than you. If you kind of catch my drift.
I do. That's somewhat part of it, but that's not the exact definition I'm going for. Okay. It doesn't just say that you're wrong. right? When I asked this one in church, months ago, I don't even think I had recorded my sermon yet when I asked this question. And I got some really good answers. That was similar to one of the answers I got. But that isn't quite the definition I'm looking for. Jesse, you said you think
Mine's sillier. I was going to say
silly?
Sillier.
Okay.
I was going to say it's the opposite of pride.
That's not really silly. It's not wrong. Silly would have been like, humility's like, I don't even want to think about what it could be in that way. But anybody else have an idea what they think humility means? Nothing?
I think Jason's formulating a thought.
Jason, what do you think?
He's thinking.
Oh, wait, Lily?
Is it just like putting other people above yourself?
Like you're saying, humility is putting other people above yourself?
Yeah, like putting yourself like below.
Oh, below other people.
And
But-
then serving them first.
So putting people above yourself is not humility. I think you meant the other way around.
Yes.
That putting them. I think that's what you were trying to say. Putting yourself under other people. That is a form of humility. That is part of humility. But let me ask this question really quickly. Maybe this will help out with this, right? When we associate humility with people, we typically, you always think of people. They say, "Oh, that person's a good person. That person doesn't bother anybody. He's a nice guy, or she's a nice person, nice girl." Right? That's how they typically will approach that, because they're never trying to hurt anybody. But is that humility? Why? But that's how we as a culture define humility oftentimes. Oh, that person's a nice person. They don't hurt anybody. Why is that not humility?
Why is that not humility? I have an answer for the other thing.
Well, give me the answer to the other thing and we'll come back to that.
So the other thing, well, if I could add on to it, it's kind of what we were talking about. What reminds me of what we were talking about our last time when we were talking about our skills that we have. I would say to serve other people is, no matter how someone is towards you, no matter what you think about a situation, people around you, things of that nature, you serve them.
Mm-hmm.
Is to humble yourself so you can serve others and serve the Lord.
Right.
Is that?
You're practicing it in a sense of it, but you're not quite defining what humility is. So here, I'll ask this question. Maybe this will help you guys out with this. So, sorry to pick on you, Lily, but you're the new person, so that you get picked on. Okay. Your shirt is black. Is it black?
No.
What color is it?
No.
What?
Blue.
Blue? No, it's black. I say it's black. Why is it blue?
Because it was made with blue thread.
It's made with blue threads, but I'm saying it's black. Why am I wrong? I'm wrong. I mean, it's clearly blue. For those who are listening, it is clearly blue, and I'm just picking on you a little bit, right? Obviously it's blue. Everyone here would say it's blue. Now I'm saying it's black. Why am I wrong and she's right, other than the fact her eyes? Because those who are listening to this right now online in the future, hi future everybody, but everybody who's listening to this in the future, they're going like, is it black? Is it blue? I'm just going to take their word for it, right? But those who are here, everyone can see that she's wearing a blue sweater, right? Why is it not black?
Because you're denying abject reality.
Yeah, I'm denying abject reality. So, humility, the answer I was going for, rather, is humility is seeing object reality, seeing things for what it is, right? You're able to recognize what the world is, right? The publican recognizes who he is. He sees that he is not a good guy in any way whatsoever, right? He's humbled himself, to use that language, right? By saying, I am a wretched, horrible person. And I know I'm a wretched, horrible person. And what do I need? I need help so I can stop being such a horrible and wretched person. Whereas the Pharisee, he's not humble by any account, right? He doesn't care about what the world sees. He's, in his own sense of it, has his own pride, and he sees himself as, I am better than this guy over here because I get it. I'm a better, to put it in the sense of today, right? I'm a better Orthodox Christian than you because I say the Jesus prayer all day long. And I come to every service and I help the poor. And I do all these kind of things and I'm so much better than you. And anyone who's like that has completely missed the point, right? Because is he doing it for those reasons, right? If you see a person that's homeless on the street and you give them some money, right? Why did you give them money? Did you give them money because they were homeless on the street at that moment in time and therefore needed it? Or are you doing it so you can feel good about yourself? And oftentimes, we do a lot of things so we can feel good about ourselves. We don't do things for the right reasons. And this parable, in the sense of it, reminds us of that. It reminds us that true humility sees object reality for what it is, and the object reality boils back down to who? Jesus. Everything should be done in Christ's name. Everything should be done with Christ in mind. We don't just do things for the sake of doing them. We do things because we see the reality of the world is everybody's made in the image and likeness of God, right? I help somebody because they're Christ, And this parable goes really hand in hand with the fact that it's one of the parables that we hear right before Lent begins, right? Which also goes hand in hand with another parable that you hear, which is the parable of the Last Judgment, or the goats and the sheep, right? Which is the one that says, when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was sick, you visited me, right? Recognizing those things, seeing what those things were, right? And what to do about them, Object reality recognizes and understands what things are and how to approach that. And that's what humility really looks like. Humility is, I know I'm a sinner. I know I need to work on my struggles. I'm not going to try to pretend like I'm better than anybody else. And where I wanted to lead this to, and funny enough, this is the class where we get the most in trouble, if we will, right? Because this is the class when we talk about how this class is shaped around evangelism and stuff like that. This is the class that I was kind of, in a sense of it, not really regretting to do, but rather a little hesitant to talk about, because this is the ortho-bro class. Why? Why did I say that? Anybody know? What's the biggest thing that happens on the internet? Jesse, you were guilty of this week, so you're going to get picked on a few times.
Controversy?
What's that? No? Nate. I like how you crossed yourself beforehand.
You're not going to win anybody's heart by trying to intellectually dunk on them on the internet. Like, you might win the argument, but you're not winning them over to Christ. I'm not picking on you, I promise. Like,
as I told him.
Right? No, I mean, I'm picking on Jesse because, this week he had that happen a little bit, right? And I'm guilty of it too. I've done the exact same thing. I've engaged with people online where I'm going, what was that for? Right? Like, it didn't accomplish anything, and if anything, it made me angry. And, the temptations and stuff like that to show to them right is a very hard thing to accompany, what's the word? Overcome. Yeah, thank you. That was the word I was looking for. Right? It's really easy to kind of fall into that. And of course, I picked on Jesse to the segment, we got a message this week. Do you mind if I tell them?
Sure.
Okay.
We've already set the stage.
Well, we got a message this week because of, we're talking with people on the internet, and, you were right about what you said, right? But that's the thing, right? You were right. It had to do with arguing with Hindus over their religion, right? You were technically right, but it didn't accomplish anything, because the thing about the internet and all this kind of stuff is debates and such like that don't accomplish anything, right? Conversation accomplishes things. Showing love and charity accomplishes things. Arguing with people, I see this all the time on X, right? Arguing with people over like when I see Orthodox arguing with Catholics over who is right about the church, and I sit there and I look at them and go, why do either one of you care, right? Like, you two are arguing with each other over the filioque, right? When in reality, you should be sitting there thinking, what do we have in common? Who's our greater enemy? right? And who our greater enemy is are the people that are within both churches, right? Who are trying to destroy the churches. You know, online you always see all the stuff. The Catholics get a bunch of hitbacks because they've been doing all that LGBT stuff and, you know, having, you know, gay masses and all that kind of stuff, right? And that's become and they got a couple of people like that James Martin guy who goes out there and can't, shut his mouth and stuff like that. You see guys like that going out there and they're hurting the church. And I jokingly tell you guys all the time, I love it when they do that because it's good for us because people come to us when they do that, right? But at the same time, then you have people on our side who are sitting there, and instead of saying, hey, come to us. You have your crazy people, come to us, we want you here. We go, hey, you guys are a bunch of idiots. You know, you let that happen. We're better than you. That doesn't accomplish anything, right? You know, like this is one of the things that drives me nuts about all that kind of stuff in the sense that, you know, you see the whole debate league. People will go on there, let's get on a debate. Let's get on a space. Or on a YouTube video, let's debate. What does that accomplish? Anybody?
Feed somebody's ego and their pride.
Exactly. It feeds just the ego and the pride. It doesn't accomplish anything of good. Maybe it gets somebody into church, right? But for every one person that brings to church, it turns 1,000 away. You know? And I can tell you the biggest reason why I'm right on that. Okay? The biggest reason why I am right on that is because people in general are emotional. And we have to understand that. And Jesus recognizes that through this parable of the emotions. That the humility, of course, is seeing things as it is, but it's also the individual's emotions that come into factor, right? Look at the publican. How does he approach it with his emotions? He's sad. He's depressed. He's angry. He's not angry at the other guy. He's angry at himself, right? Because he's taking up a life that's fairly seen as a very bad lifestyle, right? Because who likes a tax collector? Who here likes paying their taxes? If you raise your hand, you're a liar, right? You know, nobody likes that, right? And he's seen as a scourge of the world at that time, you know. So he's all these kind of things, you know, where the Pharisee is none of those things, right? And he's the better of all of that because he doesn't do all that kind of stuff, you know. But he's equally as bad as the other guy because his emotions are basically how wonderful he is. Like he takes joy in being a bad person. They're both bad people, but it all boils down to their emotions and how they're dictated by those emotions and such like that. The joy that they take or the anger they take in those emotions. And that all plays itself out very much on the internet. Very much does it play itself out on the internet. You know, how often do you think to yourself, I have a conversation with someone online about something, and things like that, and you think, wow, that was a pretty rational conversation we had. Nobody disagreed about anything. We 100% agreed on all of this, right? Please find me one of those internet debates that does that. You know, it doesn't. It doesn't exist. Unless you're on the exact same side on almost every issue, you rarely ever have that happen. You know? And it happens in all facets of everything, right? It doesn't just happen in Orthodox religion, religious circles, or religious internet, social media, right? It happens in everything. You know? Politics. How many people get online and will just rant about every little political thing? We all know those people, right? They see one thing on the news and they're the ones that post like 25 memes, right, of that particular thing. And you might agree with 24 of those 25 memes, you know? But they always have to post that, right? Or like when you see like something that we all know is inherently evil, and yet people will go on there and they'll just troll back and forth on stuff like that and go back and forth on stuff, you know? I'll tell you right off the bat, religious social media and political social media is not as bad as sports social media, because sports social media, they go after you personally. They don't just go after, you're just wrong. They go after you personally. Right? And people seek it out. Whereas in religious, there's sort of this sort of justice aspect to it. Like, we want to have those debates with people because we want them to see the truth. Right? And the same thing with politics. We post those things because we want people to see the truth that we think is the truth. Sports is not like that at all. It's just you're wrong and an idiot if you like that team. You know, especially if your team loses, you go read the comments and it's all people on there going, "Oh, you guys got owned," or we own your franchise, or silly things like that. Like that always makes me laugh. And I know I'm getting on a tangent. That always makes me laugh when it's a bad team that beats you, and they act like that team, and they beat you like once in like 20 years, and they act like they own you. But that's the thing, right? You know, that mindset exists online because we've allowed it to exist that way. We've taken objective reality out of things, and we basically have become living embodiments of the Pharisee and the Publican. We're only playing as the Pharisee. We're not focusing on the Publican here, right? We're more concerned with our own ego and our own pride and what we think is right, and we're not focusing on what actually matters. Which is why I said, hey, this episode is literally the Ortho Bro episode, right? Because, and you guys have heard this from me before, right? There's nothing innately wrong about talking about your religion online, your faith online. It's about how you go about it. And the vast majority of those people that are on there online don't go about it the right way, you know? I picked on Jesse earlier and everything like that, you know? But I want to pull it back to that and tell a little story about myself, right? I've made that mistake of getting on there and arguing with people. When all the BLM stuff was going on, back in the summer of love, if you want to call it that. I don't think it was the summer of love, if you will, but all that stuff they were calling that, right? A lot of people were changing their profile pictures to a black square. And personally speaking, I thought that was ridiculous in general, okay? Like, I already have a thing that how I don't agree with people hiding behind a profile picture anyway. That's not them. So doing that makes it even worse. But the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese, their youth department did that with their Facebook page. I was feeling particularly snarky at the time. I wasn't too happy with all of that anyway. And I went on there and I said, you know, we do a lot of stuff with the Goya kids in Colorado Springs and things with our parish and also with Holy Theophany when I was in Callahan. Right? The three churches would do stuff together. I said, until they get rid of this political stuff, I'm not doing anything with them anymore. That's what I comment on there. I got like 4 emails from people who sought me out and that to tell me how I'm a racist, how I'm wrong, all the whole thing, because I don't stand behind all of that. Okay? And I should have just ignored it, said I stood what I said. No, I engaged with it. I said, well, I don't agree with what you have to say, and I tried to argue with them. And what did that accomplish with all of that? Other than the fact that I got a nasty phone call from the bishop over it. I mean, I did. Archbishop Benjamin called me, and he chewed me out for it. Because somebody called him. And if the bishop gets called, you get in trouble. Okay? And I said, well, the reason is because I don't think they should be getting political on their account. And stuff like that. And he said, that's fine if you don't agree with it. Just don't comment on that. Because your intentions might have been right, but you went about it the wrong way. And that lesson in itself, right, taught me, and I'm hoping this will teach the same thing to you guys, that you will not win any argument online unless somebody gets hurt. You see something online, it should always be a call to come to church. It should always be a call for peace and say, hey, let's have a conversation about this. You know, one of the things that I like about like the internet, speaking of the sense of it, right, is, and this is another, you know, one of the reasons it upset me over what happened with Charlie Kirk when he got killed a few months ago, right, was because he approached what dialogue is supposed to look like, right? If you're going to have conversations with people, just have conversations with them, right? All of his videos are not him. Yeah, there's clips of him owning the libs, if you will, right, and stuff like that. And then, of course, the titles are clickbait in that sense because that's how the algorithms work, right? You know, but that level of dialogue is exactly what we should be doing as Christians, right? We should have conversations with those people. You know, I don't win arguments with my wife's side of the family over Mormonism and Orthodoxy because we don't argue about Mormonism and Orthodoxy. What I do is I talk to them about the things that we have in common and the things where we differ on. And I basically say, let's talk about what your thoughts are on it. And say, okay, well, why do you think that's the truth? Where's your evidence? What's the context behind it? Ask questions. Let them answer it themselves, right? And you guys have noticed, my mother-in-law and father-in-law have been in church because they've been visiting, right? They've been here the last couple of Sundays. They're Mormon. They're coming to church, right? I'm getting somewhere with them. It's taking a long time. It's taken almost 15 years, but it's getting somewhere with them, right? I didn't have to engage with them and argue with them over theology. Just had to invite them and let them know. And the big lesson I want you guys to take from all of this is that's how you're supposed to approach the internet, right? It's like what I said a number of months ago before our questing night. I said to you guys, those who were here, I think Jason and Nate, you might be the only two, or maybe Bree, that were here when I said that. Unless, Jesse, that was your first time probably.
I think it might have been my first.
Where I said, none of you guys are equipped to handle the internet, right? And why did I say that? I kind of already answered the question.
So that way we don't do something silly.
It's not just that. It's because everybody goes into the internet with guns a-blazing. Everyone goes online with guns a-blazing, right? And arguing over things that, you may have the right theological stance on something, but your job is not to prove to them why the filioque is nonsense. Okay? I'm just using that as an example. Or why sola scriptura is nonsense. That's not your job. Now, if you want to ask them questions on that, ask them questions. Lead them to the truth, but be humble about it in the sense that you're not there to win an argument. That's really what it kind of comes down to. That's why I've told some of you this and everything like that. Not really announcing it for the Wednesday class and those who are listening later on kind of thing. But I mean, there's no secret on this. That's what I'm saying. So we're going to start that secondary podcast, and that one's going to be about conversations, right? Why do you guys think I want to do that podcast? Anybody? Well, let me say this for those who are listening who don't know. So I've talked about this with a number of individuals about this idea that I have about doing a podcast where we sit at a table, very much built upon the same style that you see with other podcasts, right? I'm not trying to do anything anyone else hasn't already done. In the sense, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. I'm not trying to be a better show than anybody else's show. I don't care if I get one person who listens to it, I'm happy with that. Although the amount of work we're putting into it, I hope it's more than one person. But the purpose of the show is literally two people sit at a table, myself and one other person, and I ask just 3 questions, which are, tell me about your life, tell me what brought you to the church, and why should anybody be Orthodox? And that's it. And the idea is not just to ask, initially it was just going to be ask converts, those who converge to Orthodoxy, right? But I'm opening it up to everybody. I want everybody to be interviewed, right? And there's a reason for that. Does anybody know the reason for that? Why I want to do that? Jason, go ahead.
I kind of have an idea, if I were to relate to the way that, I talk to people one-on-one, is when you get someone's story, in the example, we are in the church, and we already have a class we're evangelizing, already getting that personal, we're evangelizing our ideas. To go one-on-one is to kind of show a lot of other people that, I guess in a way, you're not alone. Your story may be different, but essentially we all go through a lot of the same things, especially whenever I was here, there wasn't too many, I guess, in the adult group. And then once the flood of people started coming into our adult group, I'm starting to realize that there are a lot of people that are a lot like me more than I thought, because I've been stuck in this dark cave for so long. And that's kind of where I see it.
That's one of the biggest reasons, our stories, right? Everyone has a unique story, but at the same time, you all have the same struggles, right? People will say to me all the time, we joked before the class about confession, right? Oh, you haven't heard my confession. I got a really good one. You all deal with the same cross because everybody struggles. Every single person here struggles. Whether they it's really out and obvious, right? I'm not looking at anybody in particular, but when it's really out and obvious, or it's completely internal, you never know what a person's struggling with, right? They may be struggling with sin, that would make you go, wow, that particular person is a very evil man or woman. Or you might look at that person and go, wow, that evil-looking man is actually quite a nice guy. Because you never know what's going through, right? So the purpose of that is, of course, to get that story out, right? But it's really an embodiment of this parable. That's another reason with this class, right? To make people see what objective reality looks like and just how similar we are and how we all are called to carry crosses. The tentative name for the show is called Made in the Image. That's the tentative name for this show. And again, it's not there to be like, oh, let's take over the internet with this show and everything like that. No. I mean, we'll see how it grows and everything like that, and we'll do what we can to grow it. And I'm hoping, with some of the context I've got involved with it that can help spread it and everything like that it'll grow into something. But I'm not trying to take away from other things. Just giving people that opportunity to see that. See that, hey, you know what? We all struggle, right? And we're all supposed to be humble. And we're all supposed to see this, and really we're supposed to embody what the publican is. He recognizes his objective reality and wants to make it right. And that's what we're here to do, make things right. Why did any of you want to become Orthodox? Since every one of you here, except for me, is a convert. Why did any of you want to become Orthodox? I'm going to pick on you, Lily. Why did you want to become Orthodox?
I didn't like the lack of tradition within the Baptist church that I was going to, and there were a lot of things I saw in the Bible that I didn't see us practicing. So
Okay.
I started doing research.
Why else? Research is good. Why else?
I felt called by God because I kept seeing it over and over and over again.
What else? There's more. Called by God. You saw the errors of other churches. But what else? I know I'm asking you as if you're going to have to keep coming with answers. If you run out of answers, that's kind of what I'm hoping for. But you got anything else?
I might be running out.
Okay. Jason, why did you want to become Orthodox? Why did you become Orthodox? That you're baptized now.
Why did I become Orthodox? I was seeking the truth. I thought I could do it my way, but the more I fell into despair, the more I realized that I just couldn't take it anymore. So there's only two ways I could have gone, and I chose the best way because I told myself God's put me here for a better purpose.
Okay.
And I became Orthodox because this was the only place that had the truth and nothing but the truth.
What's different to your answer to her answer?
Defer?
Is there anything different between your answers?
Nothing at all.
Do you think there's anything different between your answer and his answer? Nate, you raised your hand. Why'd you become Orthodox?
Well, it's a multifaceted question in the sense of.
Give me the simple version.
Number one, I recognized the need to return to Christ. I was like, look, I'm tired of fighting the phone. I know what I'm doing wrong. I gotta stop. And so, I was like, okay, I need to go to church. I need to go to church. And I just did a Google search. What's the original church? What did the apostles practice? They practiced orthodoxy. And I figured if I was going to do this, I was going to do it the right way the first time. And I was tired. I was tired.
Why'd you do that? Why did you seek out the original church? Why?
I didn't want to play any games. I figured if it was good enough for the apostles, it was good enough for me.
Okay, why? I told you if you run out of answers, that's okay.
Well, I figured that if Christ himself taught the words out of his mouth to these 12 people and they carried on those practices, it was correct.
Okay,
Absolutely correct.
why?
Because Jesus doesn't make mistakes.
Okay, why?
He's the incarnate Word of God.
All right, why? It's starting to get a little ridiculous. It seems like it's getting ridiculous. There's a reason for me doing that. So stay with that for a second. Was your answer anything different than Lily's answer or Jason's answer?
Not really.
Why?
Because we're all kind of getting down into it's all the same meat and potatoes. It's just I'm putting a different herb on it.
Right. Okay, Andrew, I feel like you want to answer. Why?
So I mean, as far as my situation, I mean, I grew up like hopping around all these different churches, and then I went into the military. Really fell away from the church, and I'd say like my last year in, like I really felt a need to get back into the church. And I mean, I didn't really know exactly where to turn to because I was just very disillusioned with like
Everything
my
else?
Protestant
Right.
upbringing, and because of that, I kind of looked into Catholicism first, and then I was like, papal infallibility, not a fan, and then that kind of naturally led me to Orthodoxy. So I mean, it was kind of a combination of really realizing that I needed to get back into the church one way or the other. Doing research, trying to find the right place.
I didn't let you hear.
That, and if I'm being honest, I did drugs and I had an insanely spiritual experience.
Okay. I mean, I appreciate your honesty. I mean, that's not quite the direction I saw that going, but I mean, but the overall meat of your thing was interesting in the sense, right? Where I would say, and I'm not going to do the whole why thing with you. I can do that with Nate because Nate will play along, okay? But I won't do that all again with you. But why? No, I'm just kidding. I won't do that. No, but seriously, why? No. All right, that joke's dead. Anyway, but it comes down to is like, what's the difference between your answer and Lily's answer, Jason's answer, Nate's answer? Nothing, really. So it's the same answer. You guys just came at it differently. You had different approaches to it, right? You know, but you all came in the same way, right? Now, you know what I didn't hear any of that was? You did research on your own, but how many of you got into debates with people and they convinced you to become Orthodox?
None.
Not a single one. Now, we could play this game so someone online maybe listen to this later going, yeah, but there's only a few of you there. You could get a bigger crowd and ask that question. You're right. I can tell you right off the bat, there's definitely an argument to be made, right? You know, you're going to find people. And I know there are people online, right? And it's good that the debate brought them in, right? There's always going to be those kind of people that get brought in that sense, right? But that's not the majority of people who get brought into the church. The majority of the people did not get brought into the church because they saw someone else say, you're wrong about XYZ thing. I'm right about it. They didn't go, oh yeah, you know what? I mean, you use the thing about the Catholics, right? Saying like papal infallibility. You know? Did any of you sit there and get an argument with somebody about papal infallibility? And that's what brought you to the church? I know it was Caleb because he's not talking. Just kidding. I know it wasn't you.
I don't even know what that is.
Papal infallibility is where the Pope thinks he's basically the emperor. He's the de facto dictator of the church.
I thought he already did.
What's that?
That's what they all thought.
That's what he is. The Pope.
That's the official doctrine of the Catholic
Yeah,
Church.
that means the Pope is basically a dictator.
Okay, yeah.
And I know that's a negative connotation, but I'm not Catholic. I can say that.
No, I kind of figured.
You know, but that's essentially what that means. I was teasing you, by the way. I know you don't. But like, the thing is none of you were brought through that, right? You were brought through it with the intent of a calling to seek out the truth, you know, and you wanted to come in through it humbly. And yeah, you did your own research, right? But it comes back down to, in my catechism guide, what I have in there is, what do I say is the number one thing I expect you guys to do? Not the argue online thing, but the other one. What's the other number one thing I ask you to do? Come to church. Gold star. Come to church, right? Because that's where the change is at, right? You notice in this, and this is where I wanted to pivot at, right? This, right? Outside of just discussion, debate, and all that kind of stuff, and where that leads to is, I said, you go online, and if you do have those conversations with people, it should be an invitation to come to church, right? Because that's where they're changed at. One of the things about that parable, right? Who has the paper? I want to point out a specific line in there. You know, 2 men went up to the temple to pray. They went to the temple. Right? They went to the temple. They went to a place to pray so that they could be healed. And yet only one of them actually wanted to be healed. And the other one just wanted to boast about how wonderful he is. Right? These men went to there. You know? And it's there. It's in that invitation to come here that people can be healed. Right? And that's the biggest key thing here with all of this. Is to remind ourselves that when we're engaging with people online, or we're having conversations with our families, or those who look at it and go, what is this thing that you're part of, right? I knew a guy who was, sadly he's no longer in the church, but he was a deacon in the church, where his family thought that he was part of some Muslim cult thing, right? You know, it's where was the invitation there, right? They see, what's the perception there, you know? We have people in our families who look at us and go, what is this all about, right? And how do we bring them into it? Well, we show it through why we came into the church, right? Now, I was raised in the church, that's a little different, right? But even then, I'm expected to practice that same mindset, you know, that everything's inviting, and we're not here to win debates, right? And this is the funny thing about all this is we don't have to win debates because we're already right. That's the irony of all of this. We're right. It's in our name. Orthodox means right worship, right church, right truth. You know, fully God, or fully worshiping of God. Right? The right worship of God.
I thought Orthodox meant tradition.
No.
Okay, so... Okay.
The word Orthodox means right worship.
Okay.
Okay? But I'm just extending it out a little bit and everything. We already have that on our side, so we don't have to win debates. Right? We don't have to argue debates. What we do need to do, though, is invite people in. And how do we do that? The same way we came in, right? We have conversations with them, right? You didn't sit there and argue with yourself online. If you did, that'd be kind of weird. But, you know, you looked into it. You sought after it. You were called to it because you wanted to go to a place that would heal you, right? These 2 men went to the temple to pray, right? And what is prayer supposed to do? Bring you to God. They both went to the temple to be brought towards God. One of them actually wanted to be with God, the other didn't. And why didn't the other didn't? Because he was more concerned with himself. He didn't want to go to the temple to be with God. He wanted to go to the temple to be with himself and to show all the world what he has. That's why also in the scriptures where Jesus tells people, you know, they have their reward, right? Because they make themselves look this way. They have their reward, right? The exact same messaging, you know? So what I want you guys to take from this and such like that is when you do engage with those outside of the church, right? Engage with those people in an inviting way, in the same way you were invited into it. You know, every person here comes with a different experience and why they came into the church, right? But think back to the fact that also what you were seeking with all of that. Were you seeking Christ? Were you seeking to be right? Which one of those were you really trying to do? Well, guess what? You get to be right by default by seeking Christ. But you have to seek Christ. Has to be about him. Has to be about the kingdom, right? You can't just come into the church and go, oh, I'm Orthodox, I'm good to go now. It doesn't work that way, right? It's accepting that I'm Orthodox. Lovely, now the journey starts. Now it gets hard. Now it really means something. Now it matters, right? Up until then, it didn't matter. And that's kind of the messaging you have to tell people in the sense of saying, look, I'm not here to win an argument with you. I'm not here to tell you why the Pope is wrong. I'm not here to tell you the Filioque is wrong. I'm not here to tell you why the Baptist Church is wrong. I'm here to tell you that this is what struggle looks like and this is what leads to Christ. you know. And I'm not here to argue about you. The thing about it is, I'll say it like this. There's a meme. It's a really good meme. It's with Keanu Reeves on there where he says, I've gotten to a point in my life where if someone tells me 1 + 1 is 5, I just tell them they're right and I say, have a good day, right? You're not going to win arguments with people because the majority of people are going to tell you 1 + 1 is 5. And everyone here knows that's ridiculous, you know? But it's better just to tell them, you know what, you're right, have a good day. Just sit there and argue with them. Because if they're telling you 1 + 1 is 5, they're not ready to have a conversation with you. They're the publican. I'm sorry, they're the Pharisee now. They don't want to have that conversation with you. You know? They want to see you live the faith, and then they'll have that conversation with you. I'm going to pick on Bree now so that she doesn't get left out. Okay? But like, I'm not really picking on you. I'm just using you as an example, right? Like, your situation. Your husband's been in church. He invites you to come to church. Would you say honestly that him trying to live like an Orthodox Christian impacted you becoming a catechumen? For those who are listening, she nodded up and down with the yes. Blink twice if you... No, just kidding. But it certainly factored in, right? Yeah. You know, you became a catechumen because of your husband, right? Because of the way he was trying to live, you know? And isn't that what I've been preaching about in these classes? Not preaching, but trying to teach in these classes. You know, live like the faith and others will come around to it, right? Well, that does more wonders than arguing online. Because while you might be right online, you're not going to win anything. You're not going to win any battles, you know? Is there a place for debate and stuff like that? Sure, in the right setting, you know? If it's a big theological thing and stuff like that, sure. At the same time, probably not. You know? Having conversations with people, like your family members, those who, you know, who see the change in you, that's going to do more wonders than anything else. You know? So in a sense of it, every person here is called to live like the publican. Not in the go out there and live a life whatever you feel like, right? And then repent later on. No. I mean, like, understand what humility means, seeing the world for what it is, and seeing how your struggles, right? And showing the world that you can improve on those struggles. You know? I mean, I'm going to pick on Caleb now since I technically didn't call on him, right? You know, your dad's been coming with you to church, and we've been working on trying to bring him in, right? You know? But he's still not there yet. But I bet you him seeing the change in you is certainly playing a role into it. Would you not say?
Yeah, I'd say it is.
You know, you guys have conversations about things all the time, right? Mm-hmm. You know, same thing as the Bree situation, although he's not there yet, right? We can use another example of Jeremiah and his mom Chastity. You know, Jeremiah came, wanted to be Orthodox, became a catechumen. His mom came with him a few times because she was kind of like, I don't know about this. She's a catechumen now too. Why? Because Jeremiah came into it not to win an argument. Anthony, who teaches the other class, right, didn't sit there and say to Jeremiah's mom, Chastity, and say, come and let's debate about the Bible. He just said, let's talk. Let's talk about this stuff. Let's work through this type of stuff. You know? And that's essentially what we have to do. The internet doesn't allow us to do that. The internet encourages us to argue with people and fight with people and make other people feel dumb and such like that, and make them look dumb and look bad, right? You know? But that's not what we're called to do. You know, that doesn't mean that we then just say, okay, fine, we'll just engage them and they come to us. No, you still have to go out there and engage them, which is why I said things like I have this idea of doing a podcast where we basically show that, you know? Like, I'm going to tell you right off the bat, if people go on that and they post hate comments, they're going to get the exact same comment every single time, which is, why don't you just come to church and we can talk? You know? That's what I'm hoping it will do. Is get people to say, hey, you know what, maybe I should look up my own Orthodox church and go see what this is all about. That's all it's for. Right? And we'll see where it goes with that. Any questions? Comments? Concerns? I got a comment box now. I don't have a comment box. Oh. You all look like you're actually There was no comment box. I like the fact that like 4 of you actually
I
looked that way.
visualized it too. I have visualized it in my mind's eye.
So,
Yeah.
so I hope you guys got something from this. Is there any questions related to this? No? All right, then we'll end the episode here. Actually, let's pray and then we'll end it.
Okay.
It is truly meet you, bless you with Theotokos, and are blessed and the most pure and the mother of our God. More honorable than cherubim, more glorious beyond compared than the seraphim. Without defilement you gave birth to God the Word. True Theotokos, we magnify you. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit.